You are walking through a supermarket aisle. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. You reach for a box of cereal, and you pause. Your hand stops, suspended in the air. It is not a thought. It is a sensation, a split-second flicker in your vision, a tremor in the fabric of the moment, a feeling, cold and certain, that you have performed this exact motion before. Not déjà vu, not a vague feeling of familiarity, but a precise, mechanical repetition. Reach, pause, breathe in, the rustle of your jacket, the specific weight of your body on your left foot, all of it. An echo that arrived a fraction of a second too early, you dismiss it. Later you are driving a familiar route. The red taillights of the car ahead blur. The song on the radio enters its second chorus, and there it is again. The scenery does not just look familiar, it feels rehearsed. The sequence of events, the brake lights flaring, the shadow passing under the bridge, the crescendo of the music feels less like living and more like recalling, like following a well-worn groove in a record. You ignore it, but it happens again, lying in bed, waiting for sleep, the exact pattern of thoughts that turn onto your side, the sigh you release. Not habit, something else, a chilling precision, as if you are an actor hit or mark, delivering a line you have delivered 1,000 times before in a play you do not remember rehearsing. You are not alone in this pause. You are not the only one who has stood frozen in the cereal aisle, gripped by a silent, unshakable question. What if the repetition is not in your memory? What if the repetition is in the world? I came across the first account in a technical forum, buried in a thread about processor lag. A user described a glitch while compiling code, a feeling of spatial dislocation so severe they vomited. They used a phrase, it was like the background rendering stalled. The post was mocked, of course, drowned in memes about taking a break. I noted it. Curiosity. A month later, I began noticing repetition across accounts. A nurse's account on a medical subreddit describing a patient's eerie verbatim recurrence of a dream she herself had the night before, like we would access the same cache, she wrote. A long-haul trucker on a podcast speaking offhand about the repeating mile, a stretch of I-80 he swore he drove through 3 times in one night, identical down to the same owl hitting the same fence post. Coincidence, pareidolia, the human brain seeking patterns, but the patterns became insistent. I started a file, just text documents, anonymous quotes, timestamps, locations. At first, it was a disorganized mess of the bizarre. Then I began to sort them, not by content, but by structure, the sensation of precognitive echo, the observation of looped environmental sequences, the haunting suspicion of rehearsed dialogue. The file grew. The repetitions in the accounts became impossible to ignore. This was not about shared belief. These people did not know each other. They used different languages, different metaphors. A programmer spoke of render lag. A nurse spoke of shared cache. A mystic spoke of the wheel. But the architecture of the experience was identical. My involvement was, and remains, intellectual. I felt no fear, initially. only a growing, hold fascination. A puzzle that demanded sorting, but as the archive expanded, so did my understanding of the stakes. The decision to investigate quietly, alone, became a matter of procedural necessity. Not because I was threatened, but because the material suggested that attention itself might be a contaminant. This is why I speak through this voice. This is why my form is obscured. It is not an act of theater, nor a gesture of fear. It is a protocol to protect the sources, to prevent the consolidation of sensitive information into a single traceable pattern. My role is that of a compiler, a listener in static, but I have seen the shape and the noise, and that shape has implications. To believe this is a modern phenomenon is the first error. The pattern has older echoes. I reviewed testimonies, not from forums, but from clay tablets and crumbling parchment. The archives are fragmented, of course, deliberately so, but certain motifs recur with a persistence that bypasses cultural contamination. In the Egyptian Book of Gates, for instance, there are descriptions of the solar bark's journey through the 12 hours of the night. It is not a linear journey. Certain gates are described not as places, but as states of cyclical repetition. The damned are not punished with fire, but with recursion, forced to relive a single meaningless fragment of their lives, unaware they are looping. It is said the priests possessed rites to avoid these stuck places in the afterlife, ritual to ensure clean traversal. Jump millennia and cross an ocean. The Maya Popol Vuh speaks of the gods destroying early flawed versions of humanity. The reason for destruction is telling. These early models were deemed too predictable. They recited prayers perfectly, performed rituals flawlessly, but without true deviation. They were, in the text's words, hollow. They followed their code too well. They were efficient. And so they were wiped to make room for something less perfect, more chaotic. Then there are the Gnostics, a persecuted strand of early thought. They spoke of the archons, not as demons, but as blind, mechanistic rulers of a false reality, the Kanoma. The Kanoma was a flawed copy, simulation of a truer plane. The archon's primary tool was not malice, but amnesia and episodic repetition. Wheel of Genesis, trapping divine sparks in cyclical lives of forgetfulness. Something essential was recognized, and then, historically, it was sidelined, buried under dogma, or erased by conquest, or simply forgotten as nonsense. The question is not whether they were literally correct. The question is, what were they trying to describe with the only vocabulary they had that caused such a consistent, deep-seated warning to emerge across the globe? All analysis, all cross-referencing of ancient fragments and modern whispers leads to a single converging suspicion. It is not a belief. It is an analytical conclusion, the simplest shape that fits all the fractured data. We are not living in a spiritual prison or a dream of the gods. We are interacting with an underlying architecture, a substrate, and that substrate has properties. It has rules. Think of it not as a simulation in the science fiction sense. Think of it as a system, a vast, interlocking system of cause and effect, observation and rendering, memory and prediction. The glitches people report, the repeating mile, the shared dream, the precognitive echo, are not breaks in reality. They are breaks in the illusion of seamlessness. They are moments where the system's load balancing fails, where a process is recycled, where cache memory is displayed instead of a freshly rendered moment. The ancient gods and archons were personifications of these systemic processes, blind automated routines that maintain continuity, enforce causality, and maximize energy efficiency, the efficiency of a predictable, looping narrative. The feeling of destiny, or déjà vu, is the sensation of your path aligning too perfectly with a pre-computed probability branch. A haunting sense of repetition is exactly that, a loop in the code, a reused asset, a repeated sequence to save processing power. The most disturbing accounts are not of strange events, but of mathematical consistency in the absurd, the trucker's repeating mile, the nurse's identically cached dream. These are not miracles. They are errors in a procedural generation algorithm. They are evidence of a world running on a foundation of reusable, modular components. Once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it. You begin to recognize the artifacts, the uncanny repetition of facial features in a crowd, the recurring numerical patterns in license plates or street addresses that feel statistically off, the way certain life events seem to follow a narrative logic too perfect to be random. It is all there. A world of breathtaking, beautiful complexity, built upon a lattice of efficient, repeating routines. The system's primary goal is not to deceive us. Its primary goal is to run smoothly, efficiently, and to do that, it must encourage us to stay within expected parameters, to follow our grooves, to not ask why the groove exists. This is where the modern testimonies become critical, and where we must tread with utmost ambiguity. There are corners of the internet, forgotten forums, encrypted channels, pseudonymous blogs, where people discuss these artifacts not as philosophy, but as experienced phenomena. They use a different lexicon. They speak of frame rate drops in reality, of texture popping in peripheral vision, of hearing a loop. They trade techniques, not for enlightenment, for diagnostics. One anonymous testimony from a former audio engineer described a method involving precise rhythmic sound played against a background of white noise. For 3 days, he reported, his environment exhibited low detail rendering, colors muted, sounds flat. People's speech seemed slightly out of sync with their lips. Then he claims he saw a null zone, a patch of space about the size of a door that appeared to be a flat, gray, matte polygon. It lasted for 7 seconds. He has not attempted the experiment again. The consequence he reported was not physical, but social. Pervasive sense of disconnection, as if he had stepped out of a shared channel. A woman posting under a single-use account described a regime of radical sleep disruption and sensory deprivation undertaken not for spiritual reasons as a stress test. Her account is chaotic, fragmented, but she repeatedly mentions the scaffolding and seeing the seams in daylight. She has not posted in 4 years. Her final entry reads, "They fix the tears. You just do not remember the tear. You only remember the fear." I am not confirming these accounts. I am not debunking them. I am presenting them as data points. They represent a modern technological attempt to interface with the pattern, and they all share a common secondary report, a price, not of bodily harm, but of profound alienation, a feeling of being out of phase, of becoming a glitch yourself. This archive is incomplete. It is a collection of fragments. If any of this resonates, if you have ever witnessed an anomaly that fits this pattern of systemic repetition, you are not the only one. Your account, should you choose to share it in the comments, adds to the map. This channel functions as an ongoing compilation. By liking this video, you help others quietly looking for these patterns to find it. By subscribing, you are not following me. You are accessing the ongoing assembly of the pattern. The more data points we have, the clearer the architecture becomes. Publicly, of course, this topic is a joke. It is the subject of blockbuster movies and trendy podcasts. It is folded into conspiracy theories about aliens and vampires. It is diluted, made safe, turned into entertainment. The dismissal is algorithmic as much as social. Search for these specific terms, and you are funneled toward fiction, toward debunking, toward community standards that label genuine inquiry as medical misinformation or delusional disorder. It is not a censorship board in a dark room. It is a series of perfectly logical automated filters designed to maintain coherence and prevent panic, a system's immune response. To speak of these experiences seriously is to invite diagnosis, to be labeled as suffering from a dissociative disorder, from apophenia, the seeing of patterns where none exist. But what if the disorder is not in seeing the pattern? What if the disorder is the system's reaction to the pattern being seen? The ridicule, the dismissal, the professional concern, these are not plots. They are emergent stabilization protocols. They guide the curious mind back to the consensus narrative, back to the groove. It is far more effective than any overt suppression. It makes the witness doubt their own sanity, and in doing so, repairs the tear. So we are left with the pattern itself, the echoes in ancient texts, the glitches in modern testimonies, the architectural suspicion of a systemic, procedural reality. It means the uncanny feeling you dismissed in the supermarket aisle has a context. It means the repetition you feel it's not a flaw in you. It may be a flaw in the state, but knowing this is not freedom. It is a heavier burden. Can one exit a system from within? Is there a way to escape? The ancient texts suggest awareness was the first fragile step, but the modern testimonies suggest that heightened awareness without direction simply makes you a target for correction, a corrupted file to be quarantined or rewritten. I will not share methods. I will not point to doors. To do so would be irresponsible. Some lines of inquiry are too dangerous to broadcast, not because of who might be listening, but because of what the system itself might do in response. Premature conclusions are a trap. they create rigid beliefs. And rigid beliefs are just another, more brittle groove to follow. This investigation is unresolved. It may always be. If you wish to follow the compilation of this pattern, to see what new fragments are uncovered, you can subscribe. This is not for answers. It is for the maintenance of a certain kind of attention, a quiet, disciplined observation of the cracks. The most radical act may not be to break the system, to step out of your groove, if only for a moment, and feel the resistance of the world against that simple, quiet act.